Can you all hear me here, or do I need to use the microphone? All right, I'd rather work down here. Good morning. Thanks for having me up here. I'm from New Jersey, and on the long ride up here, I thought to myself, being a lifelong Yankee fan, I'm counting on, I'm counting on you folks, if you like what I have to say, to give me safe passage back through the state, all right? I've been in the title business for 37 years. I spend most of my time now teaching and doing expert work for various litigation matters. And I still own a title agency, have for 30 years, but most of my time is spent traveling around doing this sort of thing. And what I would like to do is have you, if you have questions while I'm speaking, just raise your hand, blurt them out, whatever. I have no problem with that. Talk it through while it's in your mind, and we can discuss it. I've also been told that you've had a lot of history about the CFPB. I'm going to give you some, I'm going to touch on that, but specific things that I think you need to understand. So, 44 days from today, August 1st, okay, you can find this if you go to alta.org/CFPB. This is just a screenshot, but when you go to the site, you'll see it's taken away. Things are going to change. And I know you're all aware of that, but I don't know if you fully understand. This is the biggest change in real estate since 1974. 41 years. It's not RESPA reform from 2010. It's not that at all. That was just a change in some forms, not a big deal. This is an overhaul of the regulatory environment that you're going to operate under. That's the thing to remember. The forms are not a big deal. They're going to be just like 2010. Little different, little odd, but it's all the same information. It's the scrutiny, the compliance, and the top-down enforcement that you're going to have to deal with, because real estate financing is going to be regulated as never before from Washington, D.C. Now you say, well, RESPA, that was from Washington, D.C. Up until the CFPB was created, RESPA was enforced by HUD through the HUD RESPA Enforcement Unit. They had 25 people, that's a half a person per state. Today, the CFPB has 1,400 people and a budget of $600 million that is not regulated by Congress. They're guaranteed that money. And on top of that, they get 15% of every single fine. So they are self-perpetuating. So, we're going to be talking about some acronyms. CFPB, of course. TRID, Dealer RESPA Integrated Disclosure, that's the new word, if you will, which is dirt, spells backwards. I looked up TRID on the internet. I said, okay, what else is TRID? Well, it seems that TRID is actually a Moroccan delicacy. And I'm hoping that our TRID looks better than that. Because that doesn't look very appetizing. I'm sure the Moroccans love it, but. So you're going to hear a lot of acronyms, but ultimately, this is going to be what decides how we do business going forward. So, just a quick background, I'm sure you're familiar. Your very own Elizabeth Warren came up with this thing. The thing to remember, if you know anything about Elizabeth Warren, this government bureau is built in her image, very much in her image. It was her brainchild, and it thinks the way that she did, or does, all right? It's all about the consumer. Independent Federal Reserve System, they regulate every consumer financial product or service, not just what we do, not just mortgages, credit cards, student loans, bank fees, everything. And it was created by the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act. So that's just the history. We don't have to go over that. But The Dodd-Frank Act was 2,300 pages. 2,300 pages, which has, I think, 349 rule-making sections, of which we are involved with TRID, which is 1,888 pages. So we took a 2,300-page bill, and then we created another 1,888 pages of regulations. And that's just one section of 349. Imagine the rulemaking that came out of the Dodd-Frank Act. Only the government could do that. This is the CFPB website. That's consumerfinance.gov. If you have not gone there, you should. They have great links here: compliance guide, guide to forms, integrated loan disclosure, all your samples, all the stuff that you need to know. They're very good at that. They're very good at disseminating information. And we're going to talk about that because that's who they are. That's the mindset of the folks at the CFPB. The other website, let me jump back here for a minute, that you should, is alta.org/CFPB. I don't know how many of you are ALTA members. I know if you're issuing title policies, at least you have their forms license, but this is free. This website here, 100% free, and you can see they've got settlement forms, they've got education and training, DVDs, webinars. This is a great site, and it's all free. You do not have to be a member to get this information. So, alta.org/CFPB. So one of two websites you really should know about. This is from the CFPB website. Educate, enforce, study. They see themselves as the neighborhood cop on the beat. That's important to understand the mindset. They're there, enforcement is their key purpose. As a matter of fact, it was just revealed in an article I read 2 days ago that they are focusing all of their efforts on the mortgage industry and moving away from some of the other stuff, and I'm going to show you a reason why in a minute. The other thing is, if you go to this website, consumerfinance.gov/newsroom, if you put your email address in here, I know you get a lot of spam and stuff, but I'm telling you, the stuff that comes out of here is important. This tells you every single thing they do. Every time they issue a press release, every time they issue a violation, or some other change or interpretation, it shows up here, and you get an email. So go there, consumerfinance.gov/newsroom. So, 15% I was talking about. Last year, $225 million they hit GE Capital with. How did they get to that? Dodd-Frank allows for 3 levels of fines: $5,000, $25,000, and $1 million a day. A day. Because GE Capital, $5,000 a day is going to mean anything to them. $1 million a day will. And that's how we get to $225 million. This fine is important because it created the thing that's most important to us in this room. The concept of the responsibility of the lender for the third-party service provider. That's what you all are. And I know you think you're attorneys, and you are, but when you're handling the lender's funds, you are a third-party service provider. And they are responsible for everything you do. In this particular case, GE Capital hired a private company to sell their credit cards. They gave them a script, but of course the people working for the private company were working on commission. That script wasn't working, so they just made stuff up and started selling credit cards. CFPB says you can't do that. You're responsible for their lies. $225 million. 15% of that they get to keep. April 28, $7.5 million against Regents Bank for unlawful overdraft practices, and they had to give back $49 million. So it's not just mortgages, as you can see in this particular case, overdraft fees. Green Tree got hit $63 million for mistreating borrowers. They weren't nice to people who owed them money. $63 million, 15% of that. Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, they got hit with $35.7 million for kickbacks. This happened in Maryland. Title company was kicking money back to loan officers. Can't do that. CFPB, real serious about this. Personally, I'm happy about it because I live in a state, I mean, it's New Jersey after all, right? Everything's brown bags, right? Sliding across the table. So hopefully, maybe we'll get rid of some of that practice and we'll start to get back to the point where people do business with you because you're good at what you do, not because of how much money you can push across the table at them. In this particular case, in New Jersey, little tiny title agency, Stonebridge Title, they got caught kicking back. They got hit with a $30,000 fine. Originally it was supposed to be $500,000, but they didn't want to put them out of business. Guess what? They put them out of business anyway because they hit them with a cease and desist order and said your business model is based upon kickbacks. As soon as they couldn't do that anymore, they had no business. They were out of business. I'm happy about that. Sad for them, but happy for me, all right? Because it starts to level the playing field. Because I don't know about this state, but in New Jersey, the Department of Insurance and Banking and Real Estate, it's all in one, relatively feckless. Nobody in here from the DOB, right? Okay. For years, we've been operating and we've gotten no help from them. Attorneys, CFPB, Kentucky law firm, 2013. Now, every law firm wants to show up in the Wall Street Journal, not this one, all right? They were splitting profits, creating joint venture operations that were illegal. There are legal joint venture operations, but you have to follow the law. And they sued them back in 2013. In this particular, this just came out the other day, May 1st. The CFPB orders developers and individuals to repair roads. Who thought they had this kind of power? That they can make developers repair roads. How's that a consumer financial product? I assume that it was part of a much larger deal because of marketing violations. So, we've seen lenders, we've seen attorneys, we've seen title agents, and we've seen developers, all falling under the purview of the CFPB's authority. And of course, realtors. They don't escape either. $500,000 fine for inadequate disclosure language in an affiliated business. Basically, they told the people that they did have an affiliated business, but the CFPB said, you need to reveal how much you're going to make from that affiliated business. So to the consumer, it's not good enough just to say, I have an affiliated business with XYZ title company. You have to say, I'm going to make $250 off of this deal. And so they were fined $500,000. These are not small fines. Remember, it's per day. So, who is the CFPB? The googly folks. They're all googly folks. And that is exactly what Elizabeth Warren intended. She brought in the brightest, most creative, most exciting, youngest folks who never sat at a closing table. And said, here, create a 2,000-page document that's going to regulate the industry going forward. And a lot of the stuff they came up with is good. We were talking about this just a few minutes ago. The idea that we'll actually be able to know 7 to 10 days beforehand exactly when a closing is going to happen, I would love that. Bring it on. That would be great because usually it's the morning of, right? How many times we sat at a 12 o'clock closing at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and now it's too late to wire the funds out, and you're going to figure out, you're going to have to recalculate for another day's interest and all that other stuff. Hopefully that won't happen now because we're going to be ahead of the game. And there's no reason we shouldn't be. It used to happen that way years ago, and we've got more and more down to the very last minute. It was mentioned, technology has a lot to do with that now. we can send things across the country in an eye blink. So why not leave it till the last minute? Well, hopefully will not happen anymore. So, in this particular case, not since the SEC after the Great Depression has a bureau had this immense range of mandates. And they have extraordinary power, as I've just shown. They created a complaint process that's already made banks more responsive. Sure, you get hit with a $225 million fine, you'd be more responsive too. And a renewed onslaught of enforcement actions, which I just showed you a few of. I could do an entire hour on their enforcement actions. I talked about complaint. Well, here it is. Here is the complaint portal. Everybody familiar with Yelp? You ever use Yelp? Trying to find a restaurant, right? Well, these are the googly folks. They use Yelp all the time. I was down in Key West earlier this year, and we're driving back, and I said to myself, let's find some place to eat. And he goes right to Yelp, and he says, I found this great place that's called Meat. I said, Meat? Yeah, it's a burger and beer place. We pull into the place, it's in an industrial park. I would never go to this place. Yelp says it's great. Sure enough, we go in there, and it is terrific. Interestingly enough, on the menu, and I don't know if you use this colloquialism up here, but on the menu, one of the items is tube steaks. In New Jersey, a tube steak is a hot dog, all right? So I said, this guy's gotta be from New Jersey. And sure enough, he's a guy who moved from New Jersey and started this place down here because he calls it the tube steaks. But the point is, a guy from New Jersey was able to find another guy from New Jersey by using Yelp. Well, these googly folks say, well, why can't we do that for mortgage complaints? Why can't we just say, hey, what you call it, Kathleen here, she did a great job. She was wonderful. Except that's not what this is. This is a complaint portal. So instead, I had to close it with Kathleen, and she showed up late, she was rude to me, she wore funny shoes. You know, they can put whatever they want up there. And they can put it up anonymously. Yes, yes. They can put it up there anonymously. All they have to do is go here and click Get Started. And you're going to find that on the form, the new closing disclosure form, it has a little note that tells you how to get here. All right? So, what they find out, consumer response, snapshot of complaints, 3 years, 2011 to 2014. This is what they found. In the first year, the first 2 years, there were 176,700 consumer complaints, of which 48% were about mortgages. Now, whether you think so or not, you are in the mortgage business. Why? Because lending drives real estate. Without lending, you don't close titles. It's that simple. So everything that touches lending is involved in the mortgage market. 48%, by far more than everything else. Well, 1 year later, there's 395,300 consumer complaints. So, in 1 year, more than in 2 years, people know the button's there. They found the button. They found the Yelp for mortgages. Say, well, it's only 34%. Well, that's just because they added more slices to the pie. They broke it down a little more. But ultimately, it's still the largest part. So if you're working at the CFPB, you're a young googly folk, and you want to make your bones in the business, and you're in charge of enforcement, where are you going to look? You're going to go to consumer loans or student loans, knowing that only 2% of complaints actually end up in an enforcement action, or you're going to go to 48%. 2% of 3%, or 2% of 48%. It's a target-rich environment. You're going to go to the mortgages. And so I was not surprised to hear 2 days ago that they're completely focusing on the mortgage products at this point. They're not spending time on consumer loans because it's 2% and 3%. Instead, they're going 2% of 48%. I'm telling you this because you need to understand who your new regulator is. These folks are serious about enforcement. And if they could find a little title agency in New Jersey, they could find a title agency or an attorney here in Massachusetts. So, the good news is that, what's that, 84% of the problems, the complaints, are people who can't make their payments. That's good for us. We fall into the probably signing agreement, other, that sort of thing. But still, they're going to be directed to our area, to the mortgage area. So here's the bad part. CFPB says they should be just like Yelp. Everybody should be able to see it. And so what they did is they made this complaint database public now. So if I go and I Google Kathleen, it's going to show up that somebody complained about her. So far, as of March, there were 558,000 complaints. It's well over 600,000 by now. People know the button exists. They know where to go if they're not happy. Even though everyone in the industry objected, consumers now have an option to share their version. And if Kathleen says that's not the way it happened at all, as a matter of fact, the consumers showed up late, they didn't know what they were doing, they were totally confused, they wouldn't listen to my advice, and their shoes were far more ugly than mine. Except that if she does that, then she could face sanctions, because she'd be revealing their private information on the internet. They can reveal it themselves, but Kathleen can't. She could respond directly to the CFPB on behalf of herself, but you can't make it public. You can't put it up on the internet where everybody can see your side of the story. And we know what happens. Once things go up on the internet, do they ever come off? No, they're there forever. Once again, I'm telling you this so you can understand how important it's going to be for you to be in compliance. I think generally, and I'm not from Massachusetts, but I know in New Jersey, we've been allowed to operate based upon standard and practice for years and years, without much influence from the regulators. When was the last time we were audited? Any of us was audited by a government agency? It just doesn't happen that often in our industry. It could happen now. These folks are much more serious about it. So, a couple of things have happened. First of all, they've been so busy enforcing this stuff that they've had to slow down their investigations. They're moving them forward at that rate of speed. They've had to pull back. And it's created a political firestorm. The Republicans were never happy about the Dodd-Frank Act. They weren't happy about the CFPB because they have no control over it. There's one director or czar. They'd like to see a board. They'd like to be able to control the purse strings. They can't do any of that. And there are bills now in Congress attempting to try to change the CFPB. Of course, as long as there's a Democratic president, the Republicans are going to have a hard time changing one of their signature pieces of legislation. I don't care either way. I'm not getting political here. I'm just saying that it has become much more than our local concern. It's become a national concern on a political level. So, one of the things that's happened, which Republicans and Democrats can agree on, is they're looking for a hold harmless period of restrained enforcement liability. Basically, the CFPB is asking us to hit the ground running on August 1st and make sure we're compliant from day one. That's like saying, hey, I built a brand new rocket, we haven't tested it yet, get in it, right? We'll fire it up. So basically what they're doing is they're saying, hey, listen, how about from August 1st to December, you hold back a little bit here. If we make some mistakes, we stumble a bit, you give us some slack. Well, they sent the letter. Richard Cordray, the director, said, you know what? You guys have had, it's been 5 years since the Dodd-Frank Act was passed, and it's been over 2 years since the rule came out. You should be ready. There's no reason why you shouldn't be ready. So a bipartisan bill was put in, H.R. 2213, to try to get that restrained period of enforcement. Now, I'm not holding out much hope for this because, of course, it means they would have to pass a bill in the next 44 days. We're talking about the U.S. Congress here. I don't see that happen. And, of course, the president would have to sign it. But people do understand down in Washington that this is going to be difficult. Well, Richard Cordray, this is the president of the ALTA, Diane Evans, lovely woman, really bright. A lot more courage than I have. I was talking to her, I was out in Albuquerque on Saturday talking to the American Escrow Association, and she was there. And I said to her, I said, just to get up in front of Congress and talk and be grilled by all those guys. You know, I do a lot of public speaking, but I said, I'm afraid I would say what I actually think, and then I'd get in trouble. So, Richard Cordray, he came out about 3 days ago and said, we will be sensitive to the progress made by those entities that are making good forth efforts. So Richard, there he is, he's going to be sensitive. He looks like a sensitive guy, right? See, contemplative, thoughtful, and sensitive. That doesn't give us a lot of comfort, okay, knowing that he's going to be sensitive. I mean, he's basically saying, if you make a good faith effort, we'll take that into account. But ultimately, we expect you to be ready on August 1st. So, today's CFPB, well, a couple of years after it started, all the really bright people started to leave. They went into the private sector. You know how that works. They make a lot more money there. And they could say that they were there in the beginning at the CFPB. And now they're working for all sorts of lobbying firms and such. So what you're left with, one guy said the bureaucracy finally caught up with me. 40% of your time is wasted on things government says has to happen. Anybody who's ever stood at the DMV understands what I'm talking about. You're left with people like the salary of a federal regulator and willing to put up the bullcrap of a federal agency. So this is who's left. This is who's running the train down there. Who do they think they are? This is from their website. Consistent, well, not the picture, but consistently and fairly enforce the rules and empower consumers. It's all about the consumer. And who's the consumer? Not you, not the realtor, not the seller, not even the buyer. And you say, not the buyer? No. The borrower is the consumer because they're the ones who are consuming the loan product. That's what they care about. The borrower's involvement in the transaction. And as we talk about going forward, you'll see that it's two separate transactions. There's the loan transaction, and then there's the purchase transaction. Okay? That's who they care about, the borrower. All this stuff is loan-centric. The new closing disclosure is not a settlement statement. It is a lending document. So, we talked before about the third-party service provider. Dodd-Frank gave us that. Just quickly, 2010, while they were passing and enacting the brand new RESPA reform in 2010, they were passing this law that was going to change everything around again. Isn't that wonderful, how the government works? So, proposed rule came out in 2012, final rule 2013. The original deadline was supposed to be January of last year. We're supposed to be ready by then, actually. And Cordray said, we'll give you till August of 2015. And this is one of the things that really changed the way that we are going to do business. And it is the Bulletin of 2012. And how many of you are familiar with it? Simple 3-page bulletin, 5 line items, and simply said this. Kathleen here is handling a loan for Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo is responsible for what she does. Wells Fargo is responsible to make sure that Kathleen understands federal consumer finance law. I don't even know if Kathleen knows federal consumer. I don't. Right? Wells Fargo is responsible to make sure that Kathleen conducts appropriate training and oversight of her employees and agents. They need to be able to know that. There has to be appropriate enforceable consequences if Kathleen conducts unfair, deceptive, or abusive practices. They have to have ongoing monitoring of Kathleen's operations and take prompt action. What is the prompt action? There's going to be a good list and there's going to be a bad list. You need to stay on the good list. Got in a form the other day from a particular lender, and one of the things they asked was, have you ever been put on the bad list for another lender? So they're circling the wagons. They're saying, you know what, I'm not going to approve you if there's another lender out there that says you're no good. So it's important to stay on the good list for every lender, not just one. So I kind of went through the top 8 people that you're responsible to, or your masters. Well, number 1 is the lender. Why? The golden rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. The lender is responsible for everything here, and it all flows down. The consumer, why? Because the CFPB says we named ourselves after them. We expect you to watch out for them. Of course, the CFPB, because they regulate RESPA and TILA. I'm sorry, this is for New Jersey. So it'll be the Massachusetts Department of Banking and Insurance. I didn't make that change, sorry. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, they issued a similar bulletin to the 2012 bulletin. So they're concerned about this also. The underwriter, the title insurance underwriter, WFG National, ultimately, they're the ones who are out there issuing title insurance commitments, allowing you to operate whatever title insurance company you're dealing with. Do they issue closing protection letters in this state?
They do.
Right. I hate to break it to you, but I know you think you're allowed to do closings because you're attorneys. If the title company wasn't willing to issue a CPL to you, a lender would not send you their money. It's that simple. All right? So, you're beholden to them to that extent. A lot of people think that as settlement agents or attorneys, they're protected by the CPL. CPL gives you no protection whatsoever. It protects the lender and the buyer-borrower, okay? You can be sued. I've been hired to testify against attorneys who don't follow the rules under the CPL. The title organization, that would be agencies that you write for or are involved with, okay? You know, you have the relationship, you understand. And finally, your conscience. I hate to say it, should be higher on the list, right? But unfortunately, you have too many other masters you have to serve before you get to that point. So, if you're just a title agent or producer, there's like 4 people, a lawyer, 2 people. But once you get to a settlement agent, you got all these folks that you're responsible for. So Dodd-Frank says, we create the CFPB. They say you, lender, are responsible for the settlement agent. And if you don't comply, well, boom. You're on the bad list. All right? Anybody remember Monty Python? So, I don't know how many of you dealt with in this state, but a lot of lenders' reaction to the bulletin was to come up with these forms where you'd have to get approved by them. Now, with the 2012 memo, it's going to happen for every lender. Every lender is going to have to come up with a process to make sure that you are approved by them, because they're responsible for you now. In this particular case, this American Financial Resources, stuff they want to know: your social security number, years of experience, disciplinary actions, escrow accounts closed, who has check writing authority, who does your closings, how long do you retain your documents, How do you handle privacy of non-public information? This has become a huge issue. Right now, there is bipartisan legislation in Congress that all professionals, basically anybody who has a license, will be subject to HIPAA-like standards. I was at my doctor's office the other day. I'm standing at the counter paying my copay, and the young lady's sitting in front of me, and she's faced over here on the other side of the counter, looking at her screen, and she's typing away, and I'm looking at the screen. I said, "What are you typing? It's a blank screen." It's not a blank screen. It has a special screen that goes over the screen, so you can only see it if you're sitting absolutely directly in front of it, so that I can't stay in there and look at somebody else's medical information. That's HIPAA. That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about, all right? This has become huge. Theft of data and theft of funds. Huge. And we are, in the industry, being targeted by hackers. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. The other thing they want is two verifiable references from other mortgage companies or banks that you've dealt with. Names, addresses, phone numbers, emails, they want all that information before they'll approve you to be one of their applicants. Another bank called Taylor, they came out with a one-page form. That's good enough for them. One page, boom, not a problem. That's just a couple of things. Then some folks, these people are actually located in New Jersey, but they do business across the country. They created a vetting company. And what they do is, best way to explain it is they have a profile of a bad actor or a defalcator. And when they look at you, they say, how close is your profile to this profile? And that'll decide whether you have a low, medium, or high risk. They do not vet your competency. They vet based upon background checks, what you call credit checks, things of that nature. Some of us in New Jersey have a problem with this. Our attitude is Bernie Madoff would have passed this the day before they caught him, right? So, but this is another choice that some lenders have made. They've, in essence, outsourced their vetting instead of doing it in-house, which leads us to the best practices. Because there's 1,500 lenders throughout the United States, give or take a few, and who wants to fill out 1,500 separate forms and get 1,500 background checks? So Alta said, why don't we come up with these best practices and get everybody to adopt them? And I can tell you at this point, several lenders have adopted. Bank of America just came out, I think 2-3 days ago, and said, we're going to be going with the best practices. Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, and they're simple. There's 7 of them. They're not that hard. The most difficult ones are going to be number 2 and number 3. Procedures for your escrow trust accounts. This gentleman from Belmont Savings is talking. You want to talk to him and say, do you have positive pay? Can you provide me with that sort of service? Because all your trust accounts should be positive pay. That means you're able to do real-time reconciliations. And that when checks are presented, they will check the check against the information that you've downloaded. I use a product called Rhino. I don't know if you're familiar with that. But it's an add-on to your production software, and it allows you to do real-time reconciliations. It sends information from your software to the bank. You're able to reconcile, and at the end of the day, you can say, yes, these are the checks I've written, these are the checks that have been presented, and we're all okay. And they check not only the amount and the check number, but the name that's on the check. It's too easy to forge documents nowadays. The other thing is physical and network security. I was talking to an agent out west, and they had an audit from the lender. They have a big contract with a lender out there. And they had an audit set up. The lender actually came to their office, got there 15 minutes early. We're walking around the outside of the building, looking in the windows to see if they could read stuff off your desk. If you had a 1003 up on your screen or laying down on the desk. This is the kind of scrutiny that we're talking about. We've never experienced this before. You walk into a bank, any bank branch, look around. Are there any files on anybody's desks? The only file will be the one that they're working on with the people right then and there. They don't leave stuff laying out because they've had to deal with this level of regulation for years now. You walk into my office, you're gonna have to walk around the files, all right? I don't know how you guys operate. Yes?
Going back to the positive pay,
Right.
are you finding that the lenders are enforcing a requirement that the attorneys have positive pay on their escrow? I'm another banker, and I've faced a lot of resistance from attorneys signing up for positive pay. And my understanding is that it's a recommendation but not a requirement.
I have seen 2 lenders that have required it. And this, what you call it, secure settlements, they require you, if you're vetted under them, they require you to share your banking information with them, and they require you to be able to provide them when you apply with reconciliations, okay? Pretty much up to date. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is through something like positive pay. And it's not that difficult. It's a simple thing. I mean, they don't charge me anything for it at my bank. So I don't know why you wouldn't want it. I mean, I keep a close eye on my escrow accounts. I'm able to get access to them online, which is, I think, one of the good things about technology. I look at them every day. I want to know what kind of money's moving in and out there. If I go there and I see, like here's a perfect example of what positive pay helps you with, is say you set out a payoff and it's 3 days later and you still have $300,000-$400,000 in your account. Well, you may not know that, but positive pay will let you know that that check has not been presented. And all of a sudden you're saying 3-4 days interest on a $400,000 loan. Who's going to pay that? Whose responsibility is that? It's going to be the settlement agent's responsibility, okay? So positive pay, I think, is a great thing. It's an easy thing. My bookkeeper loves it, okay? She's able to print out great reports. I've got an underwriting audit next week. She said, no problem, I can print this stuff out and it'll be all ready when the person shows up. Yep?
In layman's terms, can you tell me exactly what positive pay is?
Okay, so what happens is you cut checks out of your software, okay, your title software. And what happens is positive pay and Rhino, well, positive pay is on the bank's end. Rhino, and there's other ways to deal with the bank. Rhino is just one of them, okay? They take that information out of your software, they send it to the bank reconciles those two as to what's been presented at the bank so that they can see whether or not these checks have been presented or not. Just like a reconciliation. That's what you do with a reconciliation now. You look at your bank account, you look at the checks that are presented versus the checks you've written, and then you have certain exception items, okay? This is doing it in real time. This is doing it on a daily basis, okay? So you know exactly what's happening. And if somebody presents a check that didn't come out of your system, same check number, different amount, something like that, they wash the check or something like that, it's gonna know. It's gonna be an exception. You'll get a notice from the bank. That's what I do. I get notices, it says positive pay exception. And then I have to pick up the phone by 11 o'clock or they will pay it. All right?
It's a software program that reconciles checks.
Right, so it's two, exactly, but I mean, the positive pay is solely on the bank's end of things. That's something they do. The link between your software and positive pay, there are other things like Rhino that you can put in between there that connects them. You need to talk to your bank as to how they set up their particular positive pay system so you can understand how you can do it. You may have to do it manually at the end of the day if you don't choose to get something like Rhino. Rhino does it automatically. I don't have to think about it. Just sucks it out and sends it off.
What does Rhino cost?
Rhino costs, I get charged through my software provider, I think it's $3 a transaction. I think it's $3 a transaction. But I'm in New Jersey, I'm able to pass that through. So I don't know if that's something that's allowed here. But we have a transaction management fee we're allowed to charge. And so it's $25 and I add the 3 on, so it's $28. We're allowed to charge that. But I'm going to tell you right now, this new regulation, all this here, I hate to break it to you, you'll be doing the same, you'll be getting the same amount of business and doing more work. That's what regulation does, unfortunately. And it will, unfortunately, cost you more. Somebody else said, so we're going to be doing the same amount of work but making 20% less? So I don't know about the 20%, but you will be making less. That's what regulation does, unfortunately.
When you say per transaction, what do you mean?
Per file. Okay?
Per file.
Per file.
Per,
No, not per check. No. No. Per file. Per file. Yeah, per check, that would be a lot. No.
I'm leaving it.
I'm sorry, I should make that clear. So, SunTrust Mortgage, they announced that if you do not do a self-assessment by July 1st, you will not be doing business for them anymore. You will not be closing their loans anymore. They have fully embraced and adopted the best practices. Now, this isn't a best practice seminar because that's a whole nother 2 hours, but this is what's important. I know WFG has a great program. I know that they come out and they work with you, they sit down with you and get your best practices manual together. Every underwriter has tools on their website. My advice to you is, you all send remittances to them every month, make them work for it. Tell them, you get down here, show me how to set up my best practices. It's not good enough you just put something up on the internet, all right? I need your help, I need your assistance. This is not something I do or know how to do. You're the experts. I send you money every month. I know the title companies don't want to hear that, but you know, I'm an agent too. I send them a bunch of money every month. Come down here and help me out. It's that simple. And they have all the tools. They have templates that you can use and adjust for your own business. So, just to give you an idea, hackers. We in our industry have 2 things that they want. Data, which they can sell and use to do more hacking, and money in our escrow accounts. Here's a case. On the day of closing, the escrow agent receives 2 wire transfers from the lender for the same transaction, the amount of the mortgage, the new mortgage, and an additional wire for $93.50. It seems they messed up at the mortgage company, and instead of netting out the proceeds, they sent a separate check for the net. So, Agnes Lumpkin, that's her real name, from XYZ Mortgage says, the second wire was sent in error. Can you return it back to us by wire? Agnes sends an email in return containing the wiring instructions, an unencrypted email. The wiring instructions are in the body of the email. This is it right here. And the settlement agent notices it's XYZ Mortgage Company, but it's supposed to be sent to Florida to Icefall Enterprises. Who's Icefall Enterprises? So they call up the bank, XYZ Mortgage, and says, hey, listen, are you sure you want us to send the money here? $93.50 to this, to this place? So Agnes isn't in. They get Daniel on the phone. Daniel says, hey, email it to me and I'll let you know. Daniel gets it, says, Wells Fargo. He responds, yeah, Wells Fargo. Send it to Wells Fargo. That's the account. Send it to Wells Fargo. Escrow agent goes ahead and does that. Here's the problem. Agnes Lumpkin, A. Lumpkin at xyzmortgage.com. A. Lumpkin at xyzmortgage.com, right? Look the same. They look exactly the same. Except when you capitalize them. One is A. Lumpkin, one is A.I. Lumpkin. Because the lowercase l and the uppercase I in an email address are exactly the same. So some guy sitting in the basement of his Dachau in Russia with his bunny slippers on hacking away, he catches this, he changes it around, and he sends new instructions. And now you're sending money to a guy in Russia, not back to XYZ Mortgage. They noticed it. Daniel says, go ahead. He says, send it to the Wells Fargo account. The wire is set in accordance with the lender's instructions. 1 month later, Agnes calls up and says, where's the 9350 wire? Escrow agent says, we sent that. We sent that over a month ago. Packet sniffing. You may not realize when you send an email, it doesn't all go out at once. It goes out in increments, or what they call a package of datagrams, fragments of data. And your system may be secure, and their system may be secure, but the line in between, whether you're using Cablevision or Comcast or whatever provider you're using, is wide open. And the hackers can jump in there. What they do is they place a packet sniffer on the network in promiscuous mode. And they can pull that information out. And they grab it, they figure out how they can reimagine it, like AI Lumpkin or AI Lumpkin or A Lumpkin, and they send misinformation. And money is sent to Florida, and the next day that account is closed, and a guy in Russia is $9,000 richer. He's specifically targeting our industry. He knows we have money. He knows that we're under pressure to accomplish things in a certain amount of time, and so maybe we won't pay attention like we're supposed to. Who would know? AI Lumpkin, A Lumpkin. It looks like the exact same email. Unless you pull it out, drop it into Word, and capitalize it, there's no way for you to know that it's two different emails. So, never send wire instructions in the body of an unencrypted email. That's another thing. How many of you have encrypted email? You're going to have to get that, and that's going to cost you also. And you're not going to be able to recover that cost. Always send using encrypted email, fax, telephonically, or by overnight courier. Fax can be hacked, but it has to be hacked on site as opposed to over the internet, unless you're using a fax internet, a fax through the internet. But even that, one of the things that protects faxes are they're not data bits like we talked about before. They are image files. Anybody ever go into a website on the internet and they ask you to prove you're not a robot? There's a reason why they do it this way. This is an image file. The hackers can't read the image file. They can read data bits, but the image file they can't read. So you can't set up a robot that can read that number 26. In this particular case, there's a double situation. They do data bits that are all connected, so they're not separated, so they can't read the data, the individual letters, and they put an image file in there, so it's double protected. So if you ever wondered why they make you do that, this is why. So that the hackers can't bang away at this stuff. This is serious stuff. In the last month, this 9350 has happened to my agency. But we did the right thing. We made the phone calls. We double checked. We got on the line. And they still said send it. And we have all that documented. That's important also. The second one was one of my attorneys. Our clients in New Jersey are attorneys. He goes and sends an email to his client to send $85,000 to his trust account. It gets hacked. $85,000, North Korea, gone. That was the money these people had to buy this house, gone. And finally, about a week ago, I got hired as an expert witness in a case, $147,000 hacked, sent out, just changed 2 letters around. Instead of DKT 583, it's DTK 583. Settlement agent didn't notice that. Sent $147,000 to God knows where. Now that agent and the attorney is being sued. Seller's attorney being sued because the information came from the seller's attorney. Information came from the client, the seller's attorney to the escrow agent. This hacker actually carried on a multiple email conversation with the seller as if he were, with the attorney as if he were the seller. Asking questions, when am I going to get the money, how's it going, because he didn't show up at the closing. But he was able to find out all this stuff by hacking into these people's email. It's a big issue. That's 3 in 1 month that I know about. It happened to me directly, or I've been involved in directly. The other thing is, whether you know it or not, lenders are already giving you a report card. eLinks creates a national agent database. There's about 100,000 closing professionals. You're probably in this database. 240 registrations every week, updating them every day. What are they looking at? How well you do. Do you get the documents back on time? Are they executed properly? Do they get recorded on time? How quickly do you get the recorded documents and the policy back to the lender? All this stuff is being graded. And if you get a low grade, at some point, these lenders, quite frankly, they would rather deal with less closing agents than more closing agents. JP Morgan has had a conference in Philadelphia. Right now they're dealing with about 24,000 closing agents across the country. They said, we'd be very happy if it was only 12,000. All right? You don't want to be the other 12,000. Yeah?
Can we see our profile on it?
No.
Can we correct mistakes?
Well, the question is, would you know there's a mistake? So by the time you know there's a mistake is when you're already on the outside. And the lender is going to say, why should I take the time to worry about you? I got 2 lists, the good list, the bad list. I put you on the bad list. Am I going to expend time and energy to deal with you? What do you bring to me, okay, as a closing agent? There's plenty of other closing agents. So it's really the onus is upon you to stay on the straight and narrow. Yes?
Who do we know who can check and tell us how we look?
The lender. So that's a great lead into my next point. I'm sitting there at a closing. I'm looking at the papers, and the lender, by accident, sent me a copy of the report from Secure Settlements. It was a secure settlement deal, which I'm approved by them. And it says high risk. And the top of my head blew off. I'm like, what do you mean high risk? And I called them up. It was a mistake they made. My license expired in February, but I renewed it in February. They never checked to see it was renewed. They just automatically said, oh, his license expired. We move him from the low risk up to the high risk. So now I'm out there walking around with high risk and I didn't even know about it. I found out by accident. So that's important for you to have good relationships with your lender. Moving forward, that's going to be our biggest challenge with all these regulations. To have better relationships with the people that we're dealing with, whether they be the realtors or the lenders, not just the voice on the other end of the phone. To be able to reach out and say, Bob, I see we're doing this with secure settlements. Can you check and let me know? Because he has access to it, no problem. We've recently met with the people at Secure Settlements, and they are going to try to provide a way for us to look. We'll probably have to pay for it, okay, to look and see what our own rating is. I know that sounds absurd, but, you know, Secure Settlements is a completely unlicensed and unregulated entity. I know, it's also absurd, but they set up a business model. They saw an opportunity. They opened up their hot dog stand, and nobody said they couldn't do it, all right? So, November 20th, 2013, finally the Know Before You Owe forms come out. All you need to know about the CFPB is that term, Know Before You Owe. That's what they're all about. Their mission is to make sure that the consumer is fully aware of what they're getting themselves into. And as we go through the form, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But right now, we're going to take a break. And we'll come back and we'll finish up.